Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, relationships. I'm doing the relationships book tag. So this is a tag that was created by Gareth at the channel Book Songs and Other Magic, and he very kindly tagged me in it when he made it. So this is a tag that talks about both our relationships as readers with the books that we read and the authors we read, and also about relationships within books. So there are 7 questions, and I'm going to dive into them straight away. Okay, first question then is, what book or books have you had the longest? Now, bizarrely, my answer to this question is the same as Gareth's. So the book I've had the longest, I believe, is this one, Ghastly Beyond Belief by Neil Gaiman and Kim Newman, which is a book of science fiction and fantasy quotations, both from books and movies. And I got this, I mean, you can see it is really falling apart. I got this, I think, when I was about 12 or 13. When did it come out? So it came out in 1985. So I was 12 in 1985. So yeah, I think I got it pretty much when it came out. So that's a long time ago. So I've had this book, I don't even know, I can't even figure out how long that is, like 35 years, more than 35 years. It's a very, very funny book. It's long out of print, reasonably difficult to get hold of, unless you want to pay a lot of money for it, and much treasured by me because I remember just reading it and falling about laughing when I was a kid. So that's my answer to the first question. Second one, what authors have you had a close relationship with that you are still reading today? So I think my 2 longest ones probably are Stephen King and Ed McBain. So I started reading both of them as a teenager, and I'm still reading them today. So McBain, sadly passed away a few years ago, but he wrote so many books that I am, a long way from being done with his bibliography. And Stephen King, clearly also has written a ton of books and is still writing books at quite a rate. So there are, I've read most of King's books, but there are still a fair few gaps in my experience of his work. So both of those are authors I really enjoy. They both have their flaws. But I always pick up a book by either of them with a sense of anticipation, because I've read so many fantastic books and gone on so many fantastic adventures with them over the years. Okay, next question then. What new author did you start a relationship with recently? So for this one, I was going to go with S.A. Cosby. So S.A. Cosby, I think he wrote a YA novel before writing his crime novels, but he's written a couple of crime novels recently. This is the second one, Razorblade Tears. The first is Blacktop Wasteland. They are both absolutely fantastic. It's not often I buy a book in hardback as soon as it comes out, but I bought this in hardback as soon as it came out because I loved the first book, Blacktop Wasteland, so much. Just a really, really... he writes crime with heart. So he writes crime that's kind of pulpy in terms of its storylines and things like that. So this one is about 2 fathers whose kids were in a relationship and have been murdered, and it's about them trying to track down the killers. So it's a revenge book, basically. So quite a pulpy storyline and packed with kind of quite pulpy action as well, but also imbued with so much emotion and so much humanity. They're really fantastic books. Can't recommend them enough. And I'm looking forward to reading everything else he ever writes at the moment, basically. Next question then. Name a book or books that you would say influenced your formative years. So for this one, I'm going to go with The Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs. So I read that much too young. I read that again, probably when I was about 12 or 13, so probably about the same time I bought that copy of Ghastly Beyond Belief. And it blew my mind. So if you've not read The Naked Lunch, you probably know its reputation in that it's a very weirdly structured novel. Well, it's not even really a novel, to be honest with you. There's no linear storyline. Burroughs used a technique at times in that where he would literally take the page of stuff he'd written and cut it up and reform it into different sentences. And it's very extreme at times. So there is some very extreme and disturbing content in that book. But I found it absolutely fascinating. And it taught me that experimental fiction and literary type fiction can also be fun. So most of the stuff I'd read in my life up to that point had been either kids' books when I was a kid, or what I would, broadly term popular fiction. So like Stephen King, Ned Beck, people like that, thrillers and sci-fi and that kind of thing. The Naked Lunch was the first book I read that was really different, that was really experimental. And as I say, it wowed me. And I think it definitely opened my mind to, other forms of writing and things like that at an early age. And whilst popular fiction is definitely still my preference, that love of things that are a bit different or a bit transgressive, has never gone away. Next question then. Name a 2-character relationship in a book that is central to the narrative of the book. So for this one, I've gone with I Was Dora Suarez by Derek Raymond, which is a fantastic crime novel, incredibly graphic and disturbing at times. And the relationship in this one is a fascinating one. So the relationship is between the detective, who's the central character who's investigating the murder of a young woman, and that young woman. So she is, and it's purely played out in the detective's mind. So, she is dead, but consistently throughout the book, he imagines her life and he imagines, how they would interact together in an attempt to solve her murder. So he really gets under the skin of who she was in order to solve her killing. And it makes for an incredibly gripping and moving and emotional book. Even notwithstanding all the horrible stuff that happens in this book, it has real power because of that central relationship and the detective's determination to get justice for this young woman. A fantastic book. Final question then. Oh, sorry, not quite final question. So next question. Name a book that has a great depiction of family. So for this one, I want to talk about Blackwater by Michael McDowell, which I thought was just a fantastic book. So originally published in 6 serialised volumes, and now available as a collected edition. So a kind of Southern Gothic horror story from the 60s, from the 80s rather, but following this family. So it's got that kind of real family saga to it. But what's great about the family in this book is they all pretty much hate each other, but still stand up for each other. There's all sorts of, difficult goings on. There's gay characters in it and things like that. And it talks about how they are accepted or not by the rest of the family. And it just felt like, whilst it's a fantastic book in terms of a lot of the subject matter, and they are not a normal family in terms of, they are incredibly wealthy and privileged. It felt like a very true to life depiction of family life and the problems and the arguments and the distrust and things like that can exist within families. So definitely not a rosy view of family life, but it did feel like an accurate one to me. Right, final question then. Name a book that features a love or obsession with a different art form as part of its story. So for this one, I thought I would go with My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Another book that I thought was absolutely fantastic. So this is effectively a slasher novel, but the central character in it, Jade, who's a fascinating and really well done central character, is obsessed with slasher movies. And a lot of the book is kind of like essays she's written about particular films and things like that, which sounds like it would be jarring, but I thought it worked brilliantly within the context of the story. She's really, what she writes about the films is really interesting and insightful as well. I thought this was a great example of a book that managed to talk about a different form of popular culture without that overwhelming the story. Right, time for me to tag some people. So I'm going to tag 3 people for this one. I don't think any of you have been tagged or have done the tag so far, so be interested to see what you have to say on it. So those people are Nadine at Tome Raider, Sin at Sin's Book Nook, and Olivia at AV Reads. So, time for a random book from the shelves. Today's book is another book I read back in the mid-80s. This is not my original copy of it, but it is a fantastic book and a really important book in terms of the kind of evolution of the sci-fi genre in the late 20th century, and also in terms of, you know, the way we think about and talk about information and the internet and things like that. So it is, of course, Neuromancer by William Gibson. So I hope you found that fun and interesting. Do check out all of the channels that I've mentioned. They'll all be linked in the description for the video. They are all fantastic channels and well worth checking out. And do let me know what your answers would have been to some of the questions I've gone through today. As always, I hope you're safe and well out there. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.